Hey, everybody, and welcome to Superheroes Speak, the greatest podcast on the internet. That is what everyone's saying. At least that's what I've been told. So, yeah, here we are. It's another pre-recorded episode. I figured I was going to give Don and I the night off on a Wednesday night because we need our rest. We're old men. But seriously, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Thomas Marvelli, creator of The Boy and the Bot, and we pre-recorded this interview last week, and we talked for a good while, almost 45 minutes, and I figured that was a good episode, so why not just put that out for the world to see? And again, then Don and I could have the night off. Tom and I talked about not only his book, but he has over 20 plus years experience working with Marvel and Hasbro as a creative director and doing a lot of interesting things. And this was a great conversation. So I just wanted to present the whole thing to the world and see what you guys think. So without further ado, here's Thomas Marvelli. And this week I am joined by Tom Marvelli, who is the creator of The Boy and the Bot, an independent book that he has created himself, but he has many years of experience with Marvel and Hasbro. So I think we're going to talk about all of that tonight. So first off, how are you? How are you doing?
Good. Nice to meet you officially. And thank you for having me. I know obviously you could have a lot of people on, so definitely appreciate you taking the time to host and let me share what we've been working on.
Cool. And yeah, so you have 20 years of experience working at Marvel and then at Hasbro. And
Correct.
From what I read, you worked in creative marketing. You were in charge of a lot of live events and stuff like that.
Yeah, so sort of wore many hats again during my time at Marvel, where it was overseeing licensing creative, with the team doing that, as well as publishing, the design for all the trade paperbacks, hardcovers, etc. So anything that wasn't the sequential stuff in the books, as well as live events. So that was your traveling shows, theme parks, what have you, and that was more from like a sort of a brand, sort of a brand oversight role. And so yeah, so I wore many hats during that time period. Worked on a lot of great stuff. And I was there from 2000 to from 2000 to about whatever Cap Civil War was, whatever year that came out. It was like 2014, roughly around there. So yeah, it's about a 14-year period there. And then after there, left there. I was at NECA, the toy company. I was there for about a year and a half.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was there. And then after I left there, I had started my own company. I was doing a lot of sort of licensing, sort of coordination stuff, product development, what have you, as like sort of like a licensing agent. Did that for about a year and a half as well. And then Hasbro had reached out to me because they were one of my partners and obviously one of my clients at that time. And they had reached out to me if I would want to come up to Rhode Island for a full-time position there. So I was there for about 6, almost 7 years. And also I was the creative director on all the action brands, so Transformers, Power Rangers, GI Joe, etc. And then after that, that's when I started my own publishing for Another Door Comics. Basically, kind of taking that career full circle, all the lessons learned and things that my career, and started that.
So, creative director, and you also, you said live events. Does that also include conventions? Are you involved with
not
those?
The convention side of it. This was more third-party partnerships, like let's see, like Marvel Universe Live, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
All right.
Right.
As well, but again, I would just help oversee like script reviews, brand material, etc. But yeah, pretty exciting time for sure.
What I'm sure people that are watching this are kind of curious though, like what's the day-to-day life like for a creative director? Like where does, and I'm sure you have obviously some kind of veto power and you make some decisions about, but like where are those lines with a creative director?
Sure. I mean, so for myself, I mean, on the licensing side, so just kind of taking a step back. So when I had first started at Marvel, I was overseeing a lot of the. I was with my boss and the team that we had.
Mhm.
We were in charge of doing all the style guide development for. The first one I did was Sony's first Spider-Man film with Tobey Maguire.
Oh, okay.
So that was my first, and we had to start building those relationships with Sony, et cetera, because again, it was just the two companies coming together to produce the film, and then obviously it was more of a joint venture. So you had, Sony had their ownership of parts of it, and we did. So obviously working
Mhm.
together is one big collaboration, which was again a great relationship that we had with them, and built out that program, and obviously it became what it became. And then from there, I worked on all the other partner films because if you remember back in the day, Marvel was going through its bankruptcy or just coming out.
Yes.
They sold off a lot of the rights to the films to different studios.
Mhm. Yep.
One of the things, and while the studios would do a lot of the box office materials, we handled a lot of the consumer products licensing side of it. So to service that, we would develop all the style guides, brand guides, what have you, to help service our partners that we had across the globe.
Mhm.
So that was a lot of what I did a day in, day out. Illustrating stuff myself, hiring talent. So we had they still have an incredible team of designers internally who develop all that material still. So that was sort of the start of it all. And I guess they just liked a lot of the stuff that I was doing. And then they brought in the publishing side. So they gave me the publishing team and they started to report into me as well. And what I was doing with the publishing team, so I worked on like the original Civil War with Mark Millar and
Mhm.
Miller and Steve McNiven. So building out that trade dress, developing all that material. So they started giving me all the tent pole sort of storylines that they were doing on an annual basis. So I was doing a lot of, in my team obviously was doing the logos for the comic books. We were doing all the trade dress design for paperbacks,
Oh,
hard,
okay.
etc.
Yeah.
So I was doing a lot of that, and then, like I said, then the last bit was the live events that came later towards the end of the time that I was there, and it was a lot of traveling shows, what have you, because again we were doing a lot of third party licensing deals with
Mhm.
parks, attractions, etc. And when they were going into full scope development, we needed somebody on our side to essentially make sure that the brand integrity was intact for all these different activations. So again, yeah. So like I said, I wore many hats, and we got a lot done. And then as far as the creative director role, some of it was very hands on. Like I said, doing some of the illustration myself, hiring
Mhm.
talent, working with the team internally, cross functionally, with different teams like the editorial team on the publishing side, different third party partnerships. Like a Hasbro at the time is a master toy partner. Lego is another one, etc. So yeah, so it was a mixed bag of things depending on whether it was actually making the material, building style guides, doing brand oversight stuff. Yeah, you name it. It was just sort of a mixed bag. So
Okay. I have a kind of an odd question.
sure.
Since you hired a lot of talent, I know a lot of people who worked with Marvel,
Hmm.
and I'm kind of curious. Does the name Rusty Gilligan ring a bell to you?
No.
Okay, because he was involved with some of the um, layout stuff for the first Sony uh, Spider-Man movie, but like
Oh,
that
so
was
that on the film production
yeah.
side?
So that was probably with Sony, not
Yeah.
with Marvel.
Yeah,
So
more, yeah,
yeah,
because we're on the licensing side. So
yeah.
the guys that I hired for that, like Brian Hitch, I had
Oh,
hired
okay, yeah.
the artwork for that. The late, John Cassaday did a couple of
Mm,
pieces for us as well, and a few others, and then I drew some myself as well, just to kind of bolster out that program at the time. So that's how we started, But and then I worked with hired Dale Keown to help us do the Hulk film material. So I'm sure I'm sure you see some of those.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and just bringing in different talent. One great artist that I always worked with, this guy Scott Johnson. He still does a lot of licensing artwork and stuff, and he still does a lot for Hasbro toy packaging and others. He was another sort of go-to sort of creative person that would do a lot of the figured illustration stuff for us.
Okay. Um, and then nah, I'm not going to ask that. I
Okay.
feel like it's a loaded question that you might not know the answer to anyway. Um, it has to do with okay. I guess I'll ask it this way. Did you ever have any dealings with Wizard magazine while you were there?
Only when I was interviewed for the
Oh,
magazine
okay.
a couple of times, but that was really like the
Okay.
extent of it. Yeah, it was just
Okay.
They just wanted sort of a sneak peek at the people who do the trade dress stuff and some of the other parts of the book development.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now there's a story that I've heard from people who used to work at Wizard that, well, I mean, they're not around anymore at all, but about why Marvel and DC stopped going to conventions, but we won't get into all of that.
I totally did that myself.
So now, like you said, you've come full circle. You've got your own publishing company, and you've got your own book. I guess before I ask you for the elevator pitch, the obvious question would be, since you have a relationship with Marvel, or you did at one point, why did you shop your idea around first, or did you want to own your idea?
So ultimately what happened was, during my time at Hasbro, I knew I have twins, a boy and a girl, and they're both went off to college at the same time. And so it was immediate empty nest overnight. And so it became one of those I'm doing the Hasbro thing during the day. How am I going to occupy my evenings and the quiet time around the house? And I always knew that I wanted to get back to comic book storytelling and working with creatives that are storytellers in that space. And so I had started to kind of take some of the writing and illustrating I was doing in between projects when I had my own company, and I was kind of just keeping those muscles moving. And so I was like, well, let me just see if I want to turn this into something, a comic book, what have you. And then when the stuff happened with, when Hasbro did their layoffs and all that stuff, I was like, all right, that's the universe really pushing me in that direction. And so that's really, I started as soon as I got the announcement that Hasbro was doing this, and I got that call immediately thereafter. We made the phone calls and started getting some of the folks together to start building out the comic books that we wanted to do. And but I really wanted to kind of take it, build my own stories, my own characters, and for so many years, for decades, shepherding and fostering other people's properties and characters and getting them out into the world and building the, helping to assist where I could in building out the popularity of those characters and so on, and consumer products and what have you. Same with Hasbro. It really was can I do it on my own? Can I try this and see where it goes? So it's sort of like a self-challenge in a way. So that's why I've been just writing it, publishing it ourselves, through crowdfunding, nothing crazy, no direct marketing yet. But just right now, we just, released the first book, the first chapter of our series. And right now it's doing well. Like I said, it was crowdfunded, we were funded pretty much in the next first, I think 24, 48 hours. Low threshold, because I didn't know what the audience, level was going to be. And that's always the challenge when you start something new like this, where, people know the work that I've done, career-wise. They've seen it on the shelf. They've engaged with it. They've worn it. But they don't know who the person was who was involved in that, right? So the name recognition's not quite there. So part of it is really just getting my name out there, getting the recognition of hey, I've been in this industry, I've done these things, and now I'm writing and illustrating and so forth, and bringing on illustrators to help with this project as well. Multiple titles that we'll be working on. So that's why I felt, let me give it a shot, see where it goes, and we'll see how it goes.
All right. And I'm sure everyone watching is curious. What is the elevator pitch for Boy in the Bot?
Sure. So it's ultimately about this lonely boy who, through this tragedy in his life, sort of has to go on this journey of self-discovery. And really it's this robot companion that he meets along the way that helps guide him to really uncover who he really is at the end of the day. Obviously there's this company that's after some of the secrets that he's aware of and the bother is aware of. I wrote it very much like almost like a Jerry Bruckheimer. If you read the first book, it's very much that a Jerry Bruckheimer kind of cat and mouse kind of chase thing going on. In sequence. Thinking your Born Identity type movies and Enemy of the State, that kind of stuff. So we kind of open with some of that with his father. His father's a scientist. and he discovers something that he ultimately shouldn't have, and and ultimately they go after him for it. And through the course of that, that's when we're introduced to his son, and then we're sort of off to the races from there. Don't want to spoil too much because obviously it's not
Right.
credit, but ultimately it's about this boy and this sort of coming of age story, and this him learning who he is, and really ultimately what makes a family.
Okay. What was the inspiration for the story?
Sure. I would say originally when I first started writing it, my father had passed away a few years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I had looked at it from the sense of loss of a family member. What does that
Right.
do? And then I started to kind of write the story almost from a obviously from a child's point of view of like, what does loss seem like? What is it when you lose a guardian or a parent? And sort of what you go through, the sort of the stages of grief and fears and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Just kind of I tried to put it into the point of view of like a young child. So that became sort of the beginning stages of it, and then I wanted to, tell that story through like the sci-fi adventure that we go on. There's been a lot of human companion with robot stories in the past,
Yeah.
obviously, and there still are. So I wanted to make sure that this had a unique voice to it. And sort of what is that relationship to the boy and this robot, where this robot becomes a de facto kind of guardian protector to him, and the robot is trying to learn what it means to be human, and this boy is learning about this relationship that this bot had with his father and his mother, who we learned through the first story is that his mom died while giving birth to him. So he's ultimately sort of very alone in this world, and this one robot is really what the family attachment that he has left. So he's learning who he is through this robot, and this robot is learning what it means to be human.
Okay, that sounds
Mhm.
sounds pretty heavy. It's a very yeah, I guess heavy is the right word. Subject matter.
Sure.
So when you're dealing with a subject matter like that, how do you keep it from getting, going too far down that rabbit hole? Like, do you have, what do you do to
Sure.
kind of keep it light or keep it entertaining, keep it exciting?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is obviously, when you're wrapping it in this sort of sci-fi adventure, right? And at the idea
Yeah.
of this big robot. And so in the story, yes, I wanted to hit those relatable emotional beats, right? When
Mm-hmm.
the boy first finds out that this loved one, again, but it's ruining too much or spoiling too much, that this loved one in his life has passed away. What is the reaction to that? What's the thought process that happens there, immediately thereafter, the shock of some of that, the grief of that, but it's all wrapped in this sci-fi story where, like I said, there's this company that the father works for, who ultimately is in pursuit of him. So so there's we don't spend too much time on I mean, yes, we can talk about this parts of grief, and he kind of goes through that with the robot, especially in book two that we're in the process of in pre-launch right now, where we
Mm-hmm.
really kind of build the relationship between the bot and the boy. And but really, book one is really the all the setup for that, right? So
Okay.
it's the prologue essentially, where the what the father discovers, what the company is after. And again, what happens when we first are introduced to the boy? We learn obviously the boy is very introverted. He's bullied a little bit, almost like a little bit of a Peter Parker kind of scenario from
Mm-hmm.
school. And that's also very relatable to kids. And
Yeah.
kids get picked on at school all the time. And we, the main character, the boy, he's 12 years old, which obviously is a very sort of difficult time period in a kid's life, especially those middle school years. Anyone who's ever had children knows that those are really key developmental
Yes.
years, where relationships, friendships, etc., really become either become something kind of unique. And so again, I purposely wanted him to be 12. Purposely wanted to have these sort of beats of what he was going to go through. And just like any good story, you take your good, your main characters and you put them through the ringer, and then you want them to come out the other side better for it. And as we're getting through we're working on chapter 3 right now, or book 3 I should say. And in that book obviously is when this sort of timid boy kind of finds himself through the strength of and the reliance on this robot, and then obviously he's able to stand on his own. So again,
Okay.
it's a very specific character arc that we take this boy on.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And so you have a background in art, right? We've
Correct.
established that. Are you drawing and writing the book? Or are you just writing
No, so
it?
I wrote the book, because again, the way that our sort of publishing plans are working right now. So the way that the books are structured is, so for every chapter or every book volume, there's 48 pages of the main story in there. So it's almost like getting 2 issues worth of content in that crowdfunding book,
Right.
right?
Right.
48 pages, and those are illustrated by Rafael Herrero, majority of that. And Raphael, actually, while he was about almost, he had like a few pages left to do, he wound up getting an assignment by Marvel. He worked on the Marvel Dazzler comic, so he had to leave to go do that. I was like, I was like, no, go take that. That's a great, great gig to get.
Right.
And so then we brought on Leo Rodriguez, and he finished the book. And then I also have Daniel Maya, who did the prologue for me.
Okay.
So I brought those 2 guys in, and Leo is actually working through book 2, and Leo will be the permanent artist for book 2 and 3. And Daniel's working on another title with me currently as well. So those are the primary illustrators on those titles. Ren Spiller, who's a colorist, he's worked on Massives, Ram God, and some other projects. So he's coloring the entire series, including that other second title. And as far as the illustrations for myself, I'm illustrating another title that we'll do probably in sort of like the 3rd quarter of next year, because I knew to start this, it was going to be a lot of stop and go. It was going to be a lot of, as you know, when you do these types of things, like you wear many hats, and so I knew it was going to be a little bit more stop and go for me. So I needed to bring in artists, great artists that could do this storytelling for me, while I kind of leapfrog ahead to some other books that I can kind of work on. Now, as far as the Boy in the Bot books, not only do we have the 48 pages, but there's also an 8-page backup in each of those that will be exclusive to our our crowdfunding. And those I illustrated those myself. So there's little 8-pagers in the back that are kind of tie into the universe. They're not beholden to the main story. They just kind of been sort of a side thing that happens.
Oh, cool.
And then ultimately, cover to cover, the book is 72 pages.
Wow.
For each book, yeah. So 48 of main, 8 backup, plus extras like dossier pages. So because it is a mystery, we put in a little bit of like the dad's journal, like his science journal.
Okay.
Because again, there'll be a big reveal in the 3rd book, as far as some of the background of this, again, not spoiling anything. So again, just kind of leaving little Easter eggs, little nuggets, along the way. So again, some of those extras carry some of that through. So.
How did you find the transition from art to writing? Like, was it difficult to
Sure.
was it difficult to let someone else draw the ideas that were in your head? And 2, like, I mean, I haven't read the book yet. I'm going to read it this weekend. I want everyone watching to know.
Sure.
But let's look at like Todd McFarlane, and he for years wanted to bring Spawn to Marvel. They didn't want to, which is why they ended up giving him the Spider-Man book, his own title, and he gets criticized for the writing in that a lot of times. So I do think it's some like. I disagree. I enjoy those books. I have the entire run when he was on it, but there are people that argue that like there's people who can do art and there's people who can write. I don't think that's true, because sequential art is storytelling. So, but did you find any difficulty like?
So my process, because of the art background, the way that I probably write less the normal structure is probably the other way with some of that stuff, in the sense that I write the outline of the story. I plot out how many pages I need for each scene, kind of break it down, knowing, because again, just to keep the page count in control of what we plan on doing. And then what I'll do from there is I'll thumbnail sketch out every single page of the book, right? So I'm putting together thumbnails, whether detailed or very loose, But again, it's just putting together. I need 6 panels, and I'll draw every single thing there. And then besides that, I'll also give them a panel by panel description of that. So the art is there to help reinforce the words, and vice versa. So I give both in that case. But my background, because of working in licensing, reading all the film scripts, animation, working with animation, the animation stuff through licensing. I would read all the scripts and give notes on all that material. So became very familiar with that process, script
Okay.
writing and what have you. And then obviously took that very much in, just like what I did at Marvel, I did at Hasbro too, by reviewing their scripts, right? So working on, Transformers films and animated features and so on, and the animated shows like Earthspark and stuff. So again, reading all those scripts, giving comments, etc. So you kind of build a little bit of that, as far as like understanding character, understanding motive, and arcs, and making sure that you kind of take these characters on different journeys. And when I had first started at Hasbro, one of my projects that I had was we had the War for Cybertron toy line that was coming out.
Okay.
And so, but we didn't have entertainment to drive that product line. So one of the things that when I was doing the branding for that, I pitched it as the cinematic event that didn't exist, right? So I wanted, and that's why if you look at that packaging, I wanted that sort of Drew Struzan-esque kind of big epic poster key art kind of look. And so we started with the brand guide for that material, and ultimately they wanted to try to do some kind of entertainment to support it. And kind of put my old Marvel hat on, I brought product development or copywriters and groups, and we went to another office, kind of closed the door, and we broke story. So we knew like we wanted to do 3 seasons of this material. We knew that we wanted to end on an anniversary. So I sit there, I was like, all right, well, what characters do we want to touch on? Who do we want? The character arc? Where do we meet them and where do we leave them? Right. So like those types of things, and built out the entire sort of pitch for what War for Cybertron was. Then we brought in Rooster Teeth, who was obviously by Warner Brothers, and we met with that team. And they saw the brand guide. We pitched our storyline to them, and to their credit, they looked at the brand guide and said, "Hey, we want to make an animated show about that." And to their credit, that's ultimately what they did, and it wound up going on Netflix for 3 seasons. So, so it was great. And then we obviously had more toys related to it because of the Netflix, component to that. So I wrote the co-pitch for that. Understood, again, coming from the background that I had. So writing, sort of taking that next step into the writing process, was very familiar to me in that space. So, and then the illustration side, because of all the drawings I've done, I just was like, let me bring in guys that I think the flavor of their art better matches some of the themes and things that I'm doing in the book, and I couldn't be happier with what Raphael and Leo and Daniel have brought to the table and what they've done with it. And obviously Ren coloring all of it, really making everything pop. So
cool. Wow. So that's War for Cybertron. You come up with this pitch, 3-season idea, and they go and run with it. How does it feel when your idea, this would work?
I mean, it was great. I mean, obviously, our marketing team was looking for just before the E1 acquisition, deals and all that other stuff. So we kind of had to sort of drive our own ship in a way at that time. And like I said, there was just the void there to do some entertainment behind it. Our leadership team wanted to do some kind of entertainment, but it just didn't exist. So we kind of had to we had to manufacture it, in terms of building out those pitches and materials. And it became full circle because, again, old Marvel had, it was like after all the artwork was coming in, that was for the packaging that was related to obviously the brand guide that we developed, all the the offshoots of that. It really, I would look at some of the artwork that the packaging team was bringing. I was like, wow, we should really have an art of book, right? And this was even before we had the Netflix deal.
Wow.
And sure enough, I brought it to our publishing, like Michael Kelly at the time and his team, saying, hey, look at all this artwork. Is there something here that we can give it to a licensee and see if they would want to, put it into an art up. And sure enough, they did. I have copies here. They interviewed me for the book and so on. So it's one of those, I always use the adage of, if you build it, they will come, the field of dreams. And if you will it to be, sometimes it works itself out. So,
yeah, I mean, let's be honest too, though, that was the formula in the 80s, right? Like the toy company came up with the idea and then they pitched to Marvel to do a comic or DC to do a comic, and Hanna-Barbera or somebody to do a cartoon for them, right? So a lot of stuff was built that way. So it works. I mean, it's funny because you have people say that, I mean, heck, my girlfriend's one son is going to school for art, and he's like, well, what can I do with this degree? And I said, well, one thing is you could work in marketing. And he's like, oh, that's not a creative field. And it's like, it's a very creative field. And I think that you just proved it. So I'm going to have him watch this.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I always look at marketing and creative. I mean, they're sort of siblings to each other. They're sort of right brain, left brain,
Yes.
in a lot of ways. And yeah, I think they go very much hand in hand. And there are marketers have to have some creative, aspect. They might not be
Yep.
able to physically do it, but at least they can think creatively, and they can
Yes.
have those creative discussions. And
Yeah.
same thing with a creative person, because at Marvel we were so small in groups. Like, you kind of wore what would be traditionally marketing hats on top of creative hats, just because of
Right.
the things that we were doing. So you had to be sort of marketing minded, And
Yeah.
so, I always joke, like, I never just did creative for creative sake. It always had to have an intent and a reason behind its existence, So, everything was thought out. And
Right.
you know.
Cool. So back to the book.
Yeah,
What do you hope readers will take away from Boy in the Bot?
sure. So ultimately, I think it's one of the things I definitely want is, like, one of the lines that we were using in book 3 is gets fresh in my head, because I was just talking about it earlier today. It's like, you know, families come in all different shapes, sizes, and forms, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, ultimately, I want people to take away from it, like, well, what does it mean to be a family at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
And it can be from, blended families. It could be from it's really, it could be complete strangers that function as a family.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, so it's really, what does it ultimately mean to be a family? And the caring for each other and all that stuff. So I think that's really the big takeaway. For me especially, I really think that that's the part that resonates the most. And it's a fun story. It's got a lot of action. People that have read it, they're very much like, wow, this moves very quickly. There's a lot going on, and it's in a good way. And
Mm-hmm.
they're like, oh, if those that have even read snippets of book 2, they're like, how are you going to wrap this up? I'm like, oh, believe me, it's wrapped up. I already have it all sketched out. And that's why right now, even though it's two, technically it's 2 chapters per book, so I've already thumbed out all of chapter 5. I just have to thumb out chapter 6, and I'm almost reluctant to do it, because I feel like that's kind of the end. Like, once
Oh, okay.
like, I feel like that's the end of my part of it. As far as on the creative, other than just
Right.
taking it all in.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so like I said, for me, it's an exciting book. I think kids will like it, and that's why it's specifically age 12 plus. I wanted to kind of give it that younger adult kind of vibe to it.
Right.
Any of the violence is very off camera type stuff. If anyone dies in the book, it's very much off panel, if you will.
Okay.
Because again, there is death in it, obviously, because that's thematically what a big part of this is about.
Right.
But it really is, it's the violence is it's kept to a minimum, because I want the most amount of eyeballs on it, that would, readers that to engage with it and enjoy it. And again, as we know, the comic book market is very much a more mature sort of marketplace currently.
Yeah.
American comics, and the younger demographic seems to be kind of going more towards the manga, anime kind of stuff. And
Yes.
I really wanted to besides just telling the story, I mean, I didn't do this with the intent, but the hope is again, you always want readers to read your stuff of all ages. But I really hope that, like, younger folks will want to engage with it as well. And one of the things, so through the crowdfunding that we did for book 1, I was getting photos of people, and there was, someone sent me a photo. It's just some backer that would, again, was great that they backed the book. They sent me a
Mm-hmm.
photo of their young boy reading the comic on the couch, and I was like, yes, that's what I'm looking for.
Cool.
Because I think this industry really needs to bring in and engage with some of the younger audiences, and bring them into this kind of medium.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's actually something we talk about
Mm-hmm.
regularly on the show is the comic industry. You're right. It has skewed more mature, because a lot of people grew up and they wanted to keep that audience,
Right.
instead of finding ways to, like, bring in younger readers. And manga and anime are getting bigger, and even with younger readers and viewers too. So
Correct. Yeah. And that's why when I go to, like, your regular bookstores, you see it, like
mm-hmm.
you have the older demographic is by the American comics, looking at the trades and all the other stuff. And then the
Right.
younger demographics over in the manga section, and it's like, so it's like, how do you bring that group over to the American comic side? Because it's such great content. It's just, for whatever reason, they're just not engaging with it the same. And again, I'm speaking in generalities. Obviously, there's always
Right.
exceptions, but by and large, you kind of see the distinctive difference in age demographics between the two. Now, what's interesting though is, in looking at this again, years of research and looking at things, it's like, younger kids engage with the films, right? They like Spider-Man and and all that stuff,
Right.
and definitely there's a market there for that stuff. But and they'll read the movies. They again, Marvel's like a lifestyle brand that we helped create a lot of that, right? So your
Right.
backpack, your back to school program, all that stuff. Like kids are wearing it with pride that this is their characters, etc.
Hmm.
But they're not exactly going into the comic stores, whatever. They engage with the animation, the video games, etc. But it's the medium of the comic itself that I think that's the one ingredient that the kids aren't really engaging with as much as some of the other media.
Yeah. I also kind of feel like there's some missed opportunities,
Hmm.
because the movies should have brought in younger people into that should have got them interested in comics in some ways. And I kind of feel like
Yeah.
one of the things, like, we're getting there's hints of it now in the MCU, but they really should have brought the Young Avengers in much quicker, because I think if you had kids on the screen, then there might have been kids more interested in, like, ooh, if they saw a Young Avengers comic, and they might
Right.
pick it up from there. But
Yeah.
um
Well, that's why
with
I like, sort of what Lucas is doing with, and again, some of it hits. It's like anything else, like some hits or misses. Not everything, not every iteration of something is meant for us, this
Mhm.
demographic. It's like, but I do like the fact that at least, Star Wars is taking those swings between, telling older stories. That does that recent one that they just did with the young kids. That's like,
Skeleton Crew, yeah.
yeah, Skeleton Girl. I'm like, that's now that's not meant for me, but it's a great show to bring in younger kids because kids relate to that. They relate to when they see adventures of kids their own age, right? It's that whole wish fulfillment thing,
Oh
and
yeah.
and I think that's a really important aspect to a lot of this kind of storytelling is that to have the diversity, to diversify, the storytelling for age demographics and everything else. So I think it's very important for that. Otherwise, you really are pigeonholed into a singular demographic.
Yeah. The one thing though I will say on Skeleton Crew, I felt like, pretty sure it's the last episode,
Sure.
when they're fighting the pirates, and the dad gets on the speeder bike
Hmm.
and he makes the jump and he's cheering, and I'm like, that's the scene for all the dads who are
Yes.
now trying to get their kids into Star Wars. Like,
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because for the longest time, I mean, you look at Star Wars, it's always been sort of, the quote unquote dad brand, if you will, right? It's
Yeah.
from a brand standpoint, because generationally, it's our generation grew up with it and continued to embrace it. And there was a gap between some of the, and again, Lucas was doing the right thing with Phantom Menace and so forth, like trying to speak to a younger audience, right? He wasn't trying to speak to like the 30, 40-year-old man. He was trying to speak to young kids and bring them along. So it was the right idea. Everyone could debate the executions, but like at least the intent was right.
Right.
And so I think they're heading in the right direction with doing more of that diversifying as best they can. Because again, kids are different, culture is different.
Yeah.
Kids mature faster, they engage with things faster. They move into electronics a lot faster. Like
Very true.
so very much like what happens in the comic book market in terms of it being like quote unquote more adult medium. Like you see that even with in the action figure space, right? I mean, look, it's mainly targeting adult collectors.
Hmm.
More so. I mean, kids, yes, there's the parent purchase, the part, the birthday parties, all that stuff, but by and large, it very much seems like it's a lot of adults buying that stuff, and it's like, well, how do you keep that going? Because eventually, people age, I don't want to say age out of it, but eventually we're not here anymore, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, how do you bring in that next generation, especially if they're new, where they don't have the legacy component of that, right? Where it's not like a father or a mom like introducing them to the material.
Hmm.
So how do they come in cold and engage with that material? So
Well, and along those lines,
mhm.
and you have experience with live events. Any plans on taking this to Comic Cons or like
Sure.
bookstores or anything like that?
Yeah. So right now, the book itself, obviously we're doing the crowdfunding side of it.
Hmm.
You know, Ultimately, it would be great to get into the direct market and do that. Obviously, when we just started the whole thing with Diamond and what's going on there, kind of waiting
Yeah.
for the dust to settle on some of that first before kind of, re-engaging in that space.
Hmm.
But crowdfunding is really seems to be the more modern way. Like even, we put up on Webtoons. First thing we did was we put together a 12-page sampler book that you can see it on our website on anotherdoorcomics.com. You can sign into that, and you can see the sampler there. It's a black and white. We did a color sampler giveaway, as well as some of the artists were taken into the con, signing them and selling them at the conventions. We sold out at New York Comic Con and the con that they did in Brazil. So both of them sold out there, which was great. For the guys that had them, the people, our talent who had them at the booth, right?
Okay.
And because we did 6 different covers for the book, so some of the different artists, we're signing them and selling them at the show, and so those sold out, as well as some of the posters that we did. And then, like I said, from there we put the book on Webtoon. The first 12 pages of the book are being broken down for mobile devices and so on. Because again, I want to be able to get to as big an audience and have to engage with the material however they do it, whether it be direct market eventually, Webtoons, you name it. We're open to putting it on as many platforms as possible. Because at the end of the day, you want people to read and engage. So.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and that's. I mean, I know people that go to the conventions and have really good success, and I know people who go to the conventions and they do okay.
That's why I think by year 2, maybe 3, we would start to do the convention stuff. I think right now my focus, again, just starting this like last year, so we're about a year and a quarter into this. It's really about getting the name out there, getting people to engage with the material, know the material exists, and it's available, and build enough material and enough of a portfolio of books to take shows that people can see first and foremost is always proving that you're going to deliver books on time, high quality material, and build. And again, it's just like anything else. You have to build it. And I keep telling myself, it's like this is a game won in inches, right? So you have to constantly just keep moving it, and just keep bringing more people on. Like Webtoons has grown. Again, it's not big numbers because we just put it up there. Most of that stuff that's on Webtoons is a lot of manga influenced stuff. Obviously, ours is not.
Yeah.
We're already at over a couple of hundred views on that material already, and it's picking up from there as well. So, and then I started a Substack as well 2 weeks ago. So again, just trying to. So I have a Substack that people can subscribe to, and it sort of has the behind the scenes. There'll be some exclusive material there. We'll talk about my time in the industry at times. Depending on what's relevant to the topics at hand. And that's been going out so far. We've done one a week for the last 3 weeks, and so every Sunday a new Webtoon drops, and usually a new Substack drops as well, roughly around like 12 o'clock noon on Sundays. So again, just trying to be sort of very repetitive, sort of become reliable in that space that we're going to deliver. And like I said, book 1's already done. People have it's shipped to folks. We have the inventory, because make sure I overprint it, because I did want to have some for the conventions and other stuff. But and then we'll obviously when we put in, right now we're pre-launching book 2, and when that goes to full launch in June, we'll have book 1 available for purchase there as well. So constantly keeping it, again, I have like 2 long boxes full of inventory of these things that we want to be able to get into readers' hands, of course. So.
Cool. So you used the phrase "one step at a time," and this is a question that we kind of usually ask people on the show. We normally end the podcast by saying, "Don't let your cape get caught in the door," right? Which started off as a joke related to The Incredibles, no capes, and then. But it's come to kind of mean over the years, don't let your shortcomings or foibles get in your way of achieving your goals. Yeah. So what's something that you've overcome in your career or in your life to achieve a goal?
Sure. And it's funny you mentioned with the cape in the door, because our company or our publishing, the publishing is Another Door Comics. And the reason why it's called Another Door is because no matter what happens in your life, there's always other opportunities. There's always whether you have to go out and make them yourself, or whether they come to you, or however it manifests itself, you always have other options. You always have other choices. And again, I'm a firm believer in controlling your own destiny and commanding that. And that's why we started with Another Door Comics, because I think it was important that people could see, like, because again, everyone always wants to go into the big two, and then they feel rejected if they're not. Like, no, there's other places, there's other things to be done. And that's why we started with Another Door Comics, because I think it's important that people understand you have options, you always have choices, so.
Okay. All right. And obviously you're starting with your own books.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any plans to eventually bring in other creative people?
Yeah, so like I said, besides the illustrators that are working on the stories I'm writing, because right now the titles that I'm doing, they're all part of I don't want to say a universe, because that word gets used a lot now, especially with the Marvel films and so on. But but it is a universe, and the way that our stories will tie together is very much more like Sin City, where you have overlapping environments, overlapping characters. Some secondary characters become primary characters, and so on, that kind of stuff, versus a linear, like you need to do this, then this character, then this character. It's not that. So you can pick up another title and never read the other one and still be completely fine. All the characters will seem new to you, but if you had read the other book, you know who they are prior to.
Okay.
So it's that kind of connective world. And so that's why they're all written by me currently, because it's that universe. But the intent is that once we have the solid footing on these titles out there, then yes, the idea is to bring in other folks as well, to bring in other writers and other creative concepts and so on.
Cool. All right. So the most important question in any interview is, where can people find you, and where can people find Another Door Comics and Boy in the Bot online?
Absolutely. So our website is anotherdoorcomics.com. So that's our primary website, and you'll see the trailer for book 2 is up there now. Besides there, you can go on both Kickstarter and Indiegogo, search for The Boy in the Bot. You'll see currently the 2 that are funded, they're still there and active for book 1, and then book 2 is in pre-launch on both of those sites currently. So once the pre-launches will go active, we'll be launching in June. So we'll be turning off the book 1's availability on those campaigns and rolling them into the book 2 campaign. So you can find us there. You also on Webtoon, you can search The Boy in the Bot on Webtoon, and you can read the material, the sampler material there. We also have merchandise that we did, t-shirts, fan material on Threadless. So if you search The Boy in the Bot on Threadless, we're there as well. And my Substack, you can find me at Tom Marvelli on the Substack.
All right, I will definitely link to that and your main website. Yeah, cool. All right. So then the question that we normally end on is, how do you measure success?
Sure. For me, it's if I could get one person to, and we have this already, so I kind of have that success, I guess, already. But really, it's how do you build the biggest amount of readers? Because as a creative person, and this is whether you draw, write, what have you, it's just you want to share with the world and the largest amount of people in the world your creativity and the material that you're developing. So to me, success is really people reading it and enjoying it. And so far, knock on wood, it's been super positive feedback. I'm getting emails from folks, hey, when's book 2 coming? Because we obviously ended on a cliffhanger, and people are interested, and that tells me that something's working when people want to know what happens next. And and some of the folks that have also read it, they're like, hey, I could see this as an animated TV series and all this. I'm like, right now it's about the comic book doing that. Would I love to be now there? Sure. Again, it's all about storytelling. The medium is. I'm passionate about comics. That's where my passions began. And to me, it's really, I want people to engage with the comics. If other things happen, that's fantastic. If they don't, that's okay too. But really, it's about wanting readers to engage with the material and really hoping that they enjoy it. And if it brings in younger kids into the world of comic books, that's a win.
Cool. All right. Great answer. All right. Well, on that note, thank you very much for coming on.
Yes, and again, thank you for having me. Like I said, you can have anyone on, and I really appreciate the time and the opportunity. So really, thank you.
Oh, no problem. All right. Well, that will do it for this week, boys and girls. And thanks for watching. All right. Well, that was a fun interview. I really did enjoy talking to Tom. And, with all of that being said, there's one question that we ask all the time. What did we learn on the show tonight? I learned that you can work in the industry for a long time and as a behind-the-scenes person and have an idea And it's never too late to break out on your own and create a comic and put it out there. And I really applaud Tom for everything that he's done. And definitely go check out his book. In fact, down below, there's all the links to his website, the Kickstarter, and his Substack. So go check those things out. Check out what he's working on. Check out the book 1 and 2, which are live, and then maybe go get book 1 and read it, and I think you'll enjoy it. So yeah, that's all I gotta say. And as usual, make sure you go and check out superheroespeak.com, where you can find the podcast, links to all our social media at the top of the page, comic reviews, and so much more. And now on that note, boys and girls, as always, thanks for watching, and don't let your cape get caught in the door. See you next time.
If you haven't done so yet, subscribe. It really keeps this podcast alive. Smash the like button if you please. It gives us what we need. Maybe leave a comment or two. It's a really nice thing to do. And what are you waiting for? Visit our merch store.